RugbyRenegade.com, the #1 online strength and conditioning program for rugby. Are you ready to get bigger, stronger, fitter, and faster and dominate your opposition? Welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast, where we build machines.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Pro Athlete Supplementation. Check them out at pas-nutrition.co.uk for all your supplementation needs. And don't forget that subscribers to the Rugby Renegade program get a 40% discount on retail prices. So it's episode 29 of the Rugby Renegade Podcast. My name's Jamie Bain and today I interview Ryan Harris, Head of Strength and Conditioning at Dragons Rugby. And he took time out before their game against the Cardiff Blues to talk to us about all things rugby strength and conditioning. Give it a listen. Hi Ryan, welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Why don't we start by you just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got into strength and conditioning and some of the teams and sports you've worked with.
Hi Jamie. So Ryan Harris, I currently work for Dragons Rugby, being head of strength and conditioning here for the last 4 years. Previously to that, I worked with the academy for 3 years. Coinciding that worked with Wales under-20 side alongside that role. Prior to that, I was an S&C coach in what was Uwick, now Cardiff Met. So sort of 4 or 5 years there.
Yeah, and was rugby a big passion of yours? Is that why you ended up working there, or have you been involved with other sports?
Yeah, pretty much. I played rugby all through sort of school and then university, and through that really got into S&C through those channels. When I got to university, sort of took my training a little bit more seriously from a personal perspective, started to look into it, and then from there moved on to obviously coaching within the sides, doing my degree and masters there. So I picked up bits and bobs to go alongside obviously the S&C perspective, and kind of enjoyed that role, and that's what got me into where I am now, really.
Oh, cool. So we try and get in sort of the mind of our guests and try and sort of get what their philosophy is, and obviously that's not an easy question to answer, but if you were to sort of pinpoint key parts of your philosophy, what would they be?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that underpin it, but the key ones for me is, strength is a big focus, as it does underpin a lot of things. When you get guys stronger, obviously they became more robust. The injury prevention side of it ties into that, and then it crosses over quite easily into the performance on field. That's the important thing for us is, we get that crossover and looking of how to develop our guys so they're rugby athletes rather than just decent in the gym.
Yeah, definitely. And what sort of tests or training do you use to kind of make them not just strong in the gym, more sort of athletically sound?
Yeah, sort of movement ties into strength. So we're strength through the movement qualities that are replicated on field. So we don't we spend a lot of time on our core lifts and our basics to get them strong through there. Then the progressions and crossovers sort of push through. So we replicate a lot of sort of a basic session, maybe your squat, your clean, your deads, and then cross over those into some of the stuff we've been using in recent years is the sort of horizontal strength stuff like your myo truck and sled and all the rest of it, then to replicate maybe scrum position or what we look at in terms of the crossover for those forwards, especially the front five, and then we're looking at how our strength qualities echo into our speed when we look at the outside backs, really. So replicating some high speed stuff and force production, and seeing where that lies on the velocity curve.
Yeah, that's definitely a good trend that's come in. More and more people are starting to use that sort of horizontal force velocity work. And have you done any specific testing on that? I know there's the app by JB Marin that can actually monitor that. Have you done anything with that?
We've sort of crossed over onto it. One of Simon Church, who's a guy who works in our department, he's the senior S&C as well, has just finished some of his potentiation effective sled work. in terms of looking at that force production and looking how we can potentiate with a sled into some speed stuff. So we've done some on-site stuff, looking at bits and bobs. We seem to get sort of, rather than testing data, our gym data across. And then the easy given for me is obviously speaking with the rugby side, the rugby coaches, and having a look what they are seeing. Are they seeing the scrum replicate? Are they seeing better contacts in sort of tackles, etc., contact area? And, that's a big indicator for us, is at the end of the day, we've got to aid those guys in getting best output of our individuals, our players. So that's a big thing we do. We do quite a bit of testing, but most of it's sort of in-gym based testing, so you could even say it's monitoring. So having a look where our sessions are going, and are we crossing that stuff over well enough so they're seeing transition onto the field.
Yeah, that's good to hear. You don't want your testing to interfere with your training. If you're getting, like, say, monitoring out of the training sessions, that's perfect. And it's also good to hear that you're actually, communicating with the coaches and seeing what they want and whether what you're doing physically is, taking effect on the pitch. That sounds awesome. And you kind of touched on that side of thing. It makes me think about this year and kind of almost the sort of change in style of rugby. I know working in the Premiership that it seems to be a lot more attacking orientated. Is that something you've seen in the Pro 14?
Yeah, what we've got, we're under a new regime. Bernard Jackman's taken over this year, and big positive changes. Our game structure has changed, so our setup has changed, and it's quite interesting for me to have a look at our GPS data and see how our game's evolved from last year in terms of physical output for players, especially in specific positions. So we're starting to, get 4 games in that acute chronic load and have a look what the physical demands are of first of all the league and what our new shape gives us, really. So it's quite an interesting time, and it's a lot of hard work. The intensity of our sessions has had to go up, and running loads have gone up slightly, but big increase in our high-speed running loads.
And have you seen anything in number of collisions and stuff like that? There was some stuff in the press this week about there being a lot more collisions in the games, kind of due to the way that they're refereeing the breakdown, etc. Is that anything you've noticed?
Yeah, we are monitoring it. In terms of what we've looked at in the past is obviously number of contacts through our analyst department, number of tackles, and the breakdown work. I think it's inevitably going to cross over, as in I think referees are pushed on that angle of trying to make the game more expansive by doing. We look at sort of periods of ball in play, because I think a lot of the data can be nullified when you average it out over 80 minutes. So we're looking at factors within, say, a 3.5 minute ball in play block is the high exposure end of what our players have to withstand. So we're looking at those blocks and working those blocks for things like anaerobic games. Inevitably, with that amount of ball in play, there's going to be more contacts, more contact areas, just because the game is becoming more expansive.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is a question we ask all the guests on the podcast. And what do you think the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
It's a difficult one, really. You could probably, depending on what level they're at, I think there's mistakes made at all levels, and don't get me wrong, nobody's going to ever be perfect, and I think we learn a lot more from our mistakes than we do from the stuff we do well. So we're first to put our hand up. We're quite critical in our department. Is yes, we'll try things, but we'll make sure we review them and have a look at them. But I just have a look at, if you look at your semi-pro, underneath that is again probably not building a good enough strength base before they probably concentrate more on the 1%ers than they do on the 90%ers. Yeah. I think the biggest things are going to cross over is if you get your core lifts right, get your acceleration, get your speed work right, then you're going to get the best bang for your buck, especially when you're working full time and only got a few 3 or 4 gym sessions a week, a couple of rugby sessions. You've got to find out where you get the best or the most bang for your buck within that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the classic one is when you look at their nutrition and they're worried about what supplements, what pre-workout drinks or whatever, and they're eating McDonald's or whatever. If they get those basics in place, it doesn't really matter what supplements you're on. So it's a really good point. So if you have you got any interns at the Dragons, just out of interest?
Yeah, we got a couple. We run. We have done for the last 5 years, really, since we started, and they've gone on to do some good things. So we see that as a big positive. I come through that kind of setup where sort of earn your stripes and get into that environment. So I think interns are important because they do some good stuff in our department, and it's pushing them to get some good learning done for the year. I think there's a lot of guys that come out of university academically bright, but without the practical experience to apply that knowledge.
Yeah. So we normally ask, what kind of advice would you give to an upcoming strength coach? But it might be an interesting one to see what advice you'd give to someone who's actively looking to get an internship.
Yeah, exactly what I just sort of echoing what I just said. Really, I think it's just making yourself as rounded as you can. Inevitably, you're going to have to work hard. So we say to our interns when they first start is you're going to do some of the hard work and the stuff that you may find mind-numbing. But on top of that, you're going to deal with a lot of numbers. You're going to find out, what people do at this level. And then from that, it's about applying it to yourself and seeing where your strengths and weaknesses and then pushing that through. So I'd say get some good academic knowledge and get some sound practical knowledge behind you.
Yeah, cool. Great advice. Now, so you've been head of S&C for 4 years at the Dragons. How do you try to sort of change your approach without kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater? How do you change the approach so it's kind of fresh for the players, but it kind of sticks to your philosophy?
Yeah, I think it's important. It's something that we bring up quite often, and I think sort of the integrated approach with the rugby guys is important, and I think it's sometimes missed. And then also on that, remembering that guys are going to be with you sort of 42 weeks of the year, if not more, and you need to refresh it and make it sort of exciting to come into work. I suppose the philosophy that I've been told recently is if you can always remember that good teacher that teaches you something well in school, and that was your favourite subject because the teacher was half decent. So we try to sort of mix things up, try to integrate some speed stuff, obviously into the rugby stuff. So, for example, if you're doing some high balls and box kicks, then your wingers are doing their high speed stuff alongside chasing box kicks. So the integration of that doesn't become, just mind-numbing doing your straight 40s. Building up competition within the squad. So making, some transparent data within the gym. So looking to put certain guys in racks together so they're constantly challenged to beat that next guy who may be taking their starting spot. Anaerobic games is always a positive one because guys will give you far higher running numbers when they've got ball in hand and they're excited to win games, because guys in our environment and every professional rugby environment want to be there because they're competitive guys, really. So it's trying to make that competition in pertinent every day.
Yeah. And while we're talking about conditioning games and that, what's your sort of approach or philosophy in terms of that energy system development? Do you get the majority of your conditioning through the actual rugby training that the coaches do, or do you do a lot more games or MAS, or just kind of vary each different part as you go through the season?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, and that because our sport now is very data rich. It's just quite comfortable to know where each of the guys' output is for the given day or given week or given month. So what we try to do is, again, for that purpose, is try to mix it up. In a given week, for example, we may do recovery games on a Monday, depending when our game was. Then on a Tuesday, we'll get our biggest run in stimulus from the rugby activity. If that doesn't give us the stimulus we need, then we'll top up with MAS or more dynamic running, depending what we're short on. So if we're short on high-speed running, we'll top that up. If we're short on distance, then we'll top it up with MAS or tempo runs, depending where that individual is within that block.
Yeah, that sounds good. And like I say, looking at individuals, how do you, obviously when you've got a squad of 30, 40 guys, how do you individualise more with their sort of S&C training?
Yeah, again, it's working out within my team obviously I mentioned Simon Church and Rodri West works for the academy and what we call our transition group. Those guys are pretty clued in where the individuals, the players that lie within their groups are, what their targets are and what their goals are. And I think, again, it's making those transparent to the player and to the coach. I think sometimes what's missed is if you look at the sort of spectrum of results from maybe a testing battery of one player, he may be down on one thing for bench press, for example, but that's not a massive contributor to the way he performs. However, you may come back and be questioned on that individual thing. So we have a philosophy is we probably don't want to make the zebra stripes bigger. We want to make the zebra stripes bigger, not give it spots. So we kind of work on their strength to make it better, rather than work on a weakness that doesn't really contribute to that guy being the player he is. And I think sometimes it gets clouded, as in some guys are pushed down an avenue to increase a physical attribute that isn't going to contribute massively on field. So we have a look and sit down with the coaches, have a spectrum of all our results and say, yeah, I think there's room for that guy to move there. Sit down with the player, sit down with the coach, and then we set goals for the next block. I think once you've got an agreement and transparency amongst those three facets, it's easier to move forward, and it's easier to get output from player and get buy-in from coach.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. You've got to include all the people in it. And I suppose a classic example would be that skinny player who potentially doesn't look like they're physical enough to play the game, but their rugby output's fine. And then you try and put in loads of size on them, and then they lose that kind of work ethic in the game. That'd be a classic example of that. So
yeah,
you've got to take everything into account, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely.
So moving on, you obviously the big changes to the Pro 14 with the South African teams coming out. Have you played any of them yet?
Yeah, we played Southern Kings last week. So successful. Managed to have a bonus point win.
Oh, great.
There, so that was.
And that was away, was it? Sorry.
No, that was home.
We
home. Haven't travelled to South Africa yet.
So how you deal with the travel? Obviously, it's a lot further than you'd be used to travelling. How you cope with that with the players in terms of recovery and make sure they're up for the game?
Yeah, South Africa isn't really a massive one because you don't go through massive time zones, as in because the time difference is okay. We will get out there early in the week, so our travel will be earlier, and we'll have sort of a mini training camp there. So we get the travel out of our legs obviously before game day, so we'll be probably game -3 or game -4 before we get there. Then run a recovery day, a day of rugby, probably another short day, then our team run, then play. I think that's important, as in if your travel is too tight to your game, there's always an air of the guys a little bit groggy going into that if your travel is that long, sort of 11 hours plus there. So we could just got to make sure the guys that are there, we get them recovered from the travel, then we ease them into the rugby week, and then get through that really and get into the game.
Cool. And in terms of like game preparation for the players, kind of on an individual level, how structured is that from your point of view? Do you put things in place for them, or have you kind of worked with them to develop their own individual sort of preparation?
You're on about match day warm-up type thing? Yeah. So, we've got obviously individual work-ons. So the way our plan will run is everybody's got, and I think it's very individualised in terms of mentally and physically how guys will prep for a game. So we give them that freedom leading up to our team warm-up. So we just look at individual mobility prep first. So they may do some band work, some rolling, etc. They take care of that. They may link with a physio and sports therapist, etc. Do some shoulder, some hip priming, some hammy priming. Before that, then they'll go out in the field and build up some physical, more skill-based prep work. So hookers will do their throw-in, scrum halves do their passing, etc. Front rows like to do a couple of 3-on-3s and some sort of profiling work, so we'll switch on their core a little bit. And then we come into our match day warm-up, which we try to keep nice, short and sharp, really. Just switching them on physically and mentally, ready to go into the game.
Oh, cool. That's some great advice for some of the guys, so they can get their match day warm up and preparation right. Ryan, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. It's been great, and some great info. From someone working at a great level in rugby. Is there anything you'd like to share, or how can people sort of find out more about yourself?
Well, thanks for your time for it as well, Jamie.
Pleasure.
Just pretty much, I'm obviously linked with Dragons Rugby on that website, and all my contact details are on dragonsrugby.wales. If anybody wants to get in touch or any further advice on this, please contact me on that email, no problem at all.
Oh, cool, that's great. Thanks so much, Ryan, and all the best for tonight. Not sure how how the Rugby Renegade physio director will be about me saying that. Obviously, playing the Blues tonight, but all the best and good luck for the rest of the season as well.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Cheers. So another great podcast. Thank you, Ryan, for taking the time to talk to us, and all the best with the Dragons for the rest of the season. In the meantime, guys, please get your questions to us. We want to make this podcast as beneficial for you as possible, so get those questions to us. Hit us up on social media, of course. Shoot us an email on info@rugbyrenegade.com, and check us out on YouTube. Loads of good videos and content going up there all the time. And keep checking us out at rugbyrenegade.com for the membership program, and keep checking back for the podcast. Please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. For more quality rugby strength and conditioning information, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com. Rugby Renegade, building machines.